So, I've had Cade number one for like 3 years now.
Yeah. Joining us today to preview the draft is one of our favorites, Jonathan Wasserman, draft analyst at Bleacher Report. Was, how's it going, my man?
It's going well, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Of course, always. Before we get into the draft class itself, can you let our listeners know where they can find you on Twitter and any work that you'd like to plug?
Yeah, Twitter is NBA Draft Was. Put out a 2-round mock draft yesterday that comes after being in Chicago for about a week, covering the combine and talking with a lot of guys around the NBA. And so there was definitely some movement in the mock that we put out yesterday.
Nice. Yeah, please give Was a follow. And, I've worked with him for years. I could vouch, one of the best NBA draft guys out there. So, Wes, let's start at the top because I think, the Pistons win the number one overall pick, but there's been some scuttlebutt that they're not totally sold on Cade Cunningham with that number one spot. So what do you think they do at number one? And do you think Cade should be the no-brainer pick there, regardless of whether Detroit's the one who actually makes that selection?
So, I've had Cade number one for like 3 years now. And of course, every year, the team that wins the lottery says they're going to do their research and they're going to bring in a lot of guys, and no decision has been made. When I was in Chicago, some of the rival teams had said that word was that Troy Weaver really liked Jalen Green was the name that came up. I also heard recently from a source that Weaver had already initially told his staff that they were going to go with Cade. And so you hear a lot of things. Obviously, none of it's coming from Detroit specifically, so it's just rumors and they blow up here and there. But I think they wind up going with Cade. There's going to be a phase where it's Green, and there's going to be a phase where it's Mobley, and it'll all circle back to Cade. And yes, I think he's the right pick at number one. Would I be shocked if in 5 years Evan Mobley was the best player from the class? It wouldn't be the craziest thing in the world, but I think right now, based on everything we know, based on risk reward, Cade makes sense both in terms of long-term potential and the fit for this Detroit Pistons lineup.
So you said you've had him at number one for like 3 years now. What has made him, stand out in this class?
Yeah, first you look at a guy his size. He looks his body and his skill set and his feel for the game all remind you of Luka. And I'm not saying he's going to be the next Luka, but that's the type of player you're getting in terms of a 6'8", 220-pound ball handler who is an excellent passer, and the numbers don't do it justice. At 3.5 assists this year, look past that because he had to score so much. He's easily a guy who could have averaged 6 assists a game if he wanted to, and if guys made shots around him. But I think he was even more impressive and better than advertised as a scorer in terms of creating his own shot, shooting 40% from downtown. And so he's just really the full package in terms of that big jumbo playmaker who can, set the table for everyone else, but also take over games when he needs to, with the ability to get his shot from pretty much everywhere on the floor, from the mid-range to the post, from downtown. So it's tough to pinpoint any real worrisome hole in his game.
Yeah. And so what I think you and I recorded right after the lottery, and we were talking, is Cade so good that you disregard fit? Like the Pistons spent the number 7 overall pick last year on Killian Hayes, and should they go with a wing or a big because of that? How do you see Cade fitting with Killian in particular, but also Jeremy Grant, who I think is one of their best, or is their best player by far, but one of their big building blocks moving forward?
Yeah, I think Cade's perfect. Oh, sorry, Mort, go.
No, go. It's all good. I would rather hear your take on that because I've shared that before.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking in my head. I just, I've heard the criticism, or not criticism, the hesitation about Killian Hayes being there, and they just used a 7th pick on him, but he didn't really show enough to have any real confidence as a rookie that he's going to be a guy who can carry a full workload as a point guard anyway. And so I think even if Killian Hayes stays there and he turns out to be a good player, he can still use another creator in that lineup. And Jeremy Grant's usage was just so high compared to what it normally is. And so they could just use another guy to create shots to take pressure off both of those guys. And maybe we find out, next year or after next season that Killian Hayes needs to be moved because it's not going to work. But in a vacuum, Killian's ceiling is far higher. I mean, Cade's ceiling is far higher than Killian's. I don't think Hayes' presence in the lineup and the fact that they use a number 7 pick on him should impact their decision in this upcoming draft.
Do you think it could be one of those scenarios where Hayes' development is actually somewhat accelerated by the presence of Cade, because now you have this big guard who can play make, who can score, who can take so much attention away from him?
Yeah, part of me thinks it'll be good for both of them. You know, we just saw Cade do everything for Oklahoma State, and it led to, honestly, some inefficiency. He shot 46% inside the arc. That's the lowest 2-point percentage of any number 1 overall pick in like the last decade. And so I think in some regards, it'll be good for Cade to have another guy who handles the ball a little bit and who's a good passer. And then for Killian, yeah, like defense is stacked up on Killian is bad news. I mean, he's just not ready for that. And he's not skilled enough at this level to be able to handle that. And so I think it'll be good for Killian to have another guy to take pressure off him. And so, yeah, I think there's a good chance it could be good for both of them.
So last Pistons question before we move on, because there shouldn't be this much conjecture about the number 1 pick. But, if all of this scuttlebutt proves true, and if they don't see a ton of separation between Cade and Jalen Green in particular, wouldn't the smart play then just to be to trade down, to the Rockets, who I would assume, are probably higher on Cade than Jalen? But either way, like if you're not sold that there's that much of a difference, it reminds me of 2017 with the Celtics, where they said, sure, we don't see a ton of difference between Fultz and Tatum. We're happy with either one.
Yeah, I'm sure it's conversations they talked about. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what Houston would offer to move up to number 1. And what who's number 3? I'm blanking out.
Cleveland.
What Cleveland would offer, and how teams value Sexton, in trade deals. Like, there's a lot going on there in terms of moving parts. But yeah, there are definitely conversations worth having, and I'm sure there are discussions that have happened inside Detroit's front office about what it would take for them to move down.
Yeah. Okay. So
I actually have one question before we leave the Cade Cunningham Pistons thing, because this fascinates me to no end. You know how Oklahoma City Thunder have like 1 million draft picks. And they can swing so many deals. I'm looking at this draft in particular as them having maybe the necessary firepower to make a strong play for a Cade Cunningham who can come in and be their franchise player. Is that at all in the cards, you think?
I'm sure they're thinking about it. I mean, they're not going to use all those picks to make draft picks. I mean, they're going to use them to try and make deals. It really also depends on like how Detroit really does value Cade. If they think Cade is another Luka, then these conversations are all irrelevant because they're not going to move down, right? If they're unsure if Cade is that good, or if they have any hesitation about him, or they like equally, Green or Mobley or Suggs, then these conversations are a little more realistic to have. But it really all depends on how Detroit values Cade, and regardless of what the rumors say, we have no idea what Weaver really thinks about Cade.
Yep. So, assuming Detroit stands pat at 1, takes Cade, the real suspense starts at 2 with Houston. It seems like it's going to be down to Jalen Green, Evan Mobley, Jalen Suggs. In your latest mock, you have Green going number 2. So why do you think Green would be a good fit with Houston there?
Well, I mean, he's exactly what they need. They need a lot. I mean, offensive, defensively, like to talk about needs is silly with a team like that. That's really at phase 1 of the rebuild. But I think we're seeing in the playoffs, like teams love these Devin Bookers and the Donovan Mitchells. And there's just like very little, and to even see Anthony Edwards come in and score like he did was a good sign. And I think that may have helped the confidence and belief in Jalen Green that he could similarly do that. And then with Mobley, I think there's just like a hint of risk with taking a big guy top 3, which doesn't always pan out well, although Ayton looks pretty good. But he's very thin. I mean, he's just so thin. And I think that just is a little bit scary when you can get a guy who could probably put in 25 points a game by his second year in the league. And his comfort level, Jalen Green's comfort level in the G League, and I know it's not the NBA, but his comfort level creating his own shot and making shots and scoring from everywhere was just like boom. I mean, he just looked like a surefire big time NBA scorer. And that's just tough to pass on in today's league when shot creation is valued. Guys can go out and get you 25 every single game. I mean, that's just there's a lot of value tied to that. And I think Mobley is an awesome prospect, but maybe he's a better answer for a team that already has some pieces in place. So he doesn't have to do as much scoring because that's not really going to be his forte early in his career. So I just think there's a little, with Green, there's a lot of safety and plenty of potential reward, maybe just a hint more risk with Mobley.
Yeah. You actually brought up an interesting point that I meant to ask even before we got into the specific prospects. You know, based on what you've heard throughout the league and like at the Combine last week in particular, have the playoffs changed what teams are looking for in the draft, or really like the last couple years? Like, are teams now valuing shot creation over bigs in particular, like looking for more rangy wings who can play multiple positions, especially defensively?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a thing that's going on, that people know that that's the type of guard they want. And again, like after the Wiseman thing, like perception wise, you know, teams are just like a little afraid to take a big guy, and you could just get big guys, seems like easier. And they're just harder to find, guys like Green. And so I think all of that comes into play here, and why right now I'd give Green the nod at number 2, or give him the edge this early.
Yeah. And if they do go with Green, if the Rockets do go with Green at 2, how do you see him fitting with Kevin Porter Jr. in particular?
I think they're pretty interchangeable. I mean, you'd probably play Porter at the 3. He's stronger, so he'd probably, you want him guarding more of the wing types, and Jalen more of a guarding ball handlers and combos and stuff like that. But I don't see why they can't fit. I mean, there's enough shots to go around in that offense where I'm not too worried about the two of them together, and they're both ISO players, you know, pick and roll scorers, and it'll be interesting to see where Porter's career goes from here. I mean, he was one of the guys I got right in that draft. I had him as a lottery pick. I mean, I may not have got it right. He may, you know, collapse next year and just totally hit the wall mentally. He's been a little bit unpredictable, but in terms of his talent and skill level, like, he's a guy who could put up 20 a game. And so if you have two of those wings on the floor at the same time, I think that's a real plus in today's league.
As for Green, I mean, I had all over at my day job, we interviewed Kevin Tiller, who's the former director of operations for the Ignite. So he was very close to Jalen Green. And one of the things that he said was just the effortlessness in his athleticism as well. He was just popping off the floor. And a lot of people usually just limit athleticism, and nowadays at least just talking about defensive upside. But having someone who can just get from point A to point B in a flash offensively just gives you such a tremendous offensive boost as well. I could definitely see him being very much attractive to teams higher up. I know a lot of people are saying he should be down in like the 4 or 5 range. I would almost be shocked if Green goes that low.
Yeah, again, just going back to, like, he's not going past 3. Like, the scouts see a star. And I think if there's one question mark is, okay, the offense is going to run through him, and his shot selection is a little questionable. If you're questioning him, it's the same questions that were talked about Anthony Edwards. Can an offense run efficiently if it's through his style of shot selection, which is a lot of hero jumpers? But honestly, I think that he's good enough in terms at making those jumpers where it's not so concerning. You know, it's like the same thing with Zach. Like, we still don't know, is Zach LaVine good? Like, Zach LaVine scores 25 a game, and we still don't really understand his value. And some guys see an all-star, and some guys see somebody that you don't really want to build with. And so that's part of the conversation with Jalen Green. And yeah, going back to his athleticism, I mean, it doesn't get any better. And I kind of, the way I picture it and think about it and I've talked about it, is like, he can get you 15 a game just without making any basketball plays, just because of his first step and his last step. He beats rim protection to the rim, and he beats you off the bounce off that first step, and he's just impossible to stay in front of, both in the open floor and in the half court. And his, around the rim, he gets like incredible hang time and adjusting in the air, and he's not the most efficient finisher, but some of the finishes he pulls off are mind-blowing. And so if he just adds some nuance and adds some skill to his game, which he's consistently done since he's been a junior in high school, like, there's no reason why he can't be one of the top few scorers in the league.
Yeah. It feels like he is going to be what J.R. Smith was supposed to be.
Yeah, that's the idea. I mean, I can't, going back to JR in high school, I was a little too young, but he was, but Green has every skill and physical trait you can ask for elite scoring potential.